California voters came out in favor of legalizing marijuana in the state, but questions remain about how it will work.
Valley View News, Dana Lights talked in Studio B with seasoned political science professor about the future of legal pot.
I'm here with Professor Nicholas Dungy from the CSUN Political Science Department, and we're here talking about the legalization of marijuana and Prop 64. Thank you so much for being here today.
Dana, it's a pleasure.
California said yes on legalizing marijuana. Do you think this is a good idea?
I think it's an extraordinarily good idea. Absolutely, for many reasons, for economic, legal, political, social reasons. It's an excellent decision.
And so now that Prop 64 has passed, what does this mean for California?
Well, it means many things. If you want to talk about the legal process itself, it possibly means a lower or a reduction in people who are incarcerated for nonviolent charges related to the possession of marijuana or drug charges. So in terms of the population, the prison population, and the sort of the process of people involved in the criminal process itself, it's extraordinarily important. And I know that California is under much pressure from the federal government to reduce its prison population. Now, I don't have the exact numbers on me, but I can imagine that a significant number of people currently involved in the state penitentiary system or the criminal process system are there for nonviolent drug offense charges. So this could have an immediate impact on that, and that's a very, very important issue right now. And of course, it could have extraordinary social implications, because whenever you decriminalize an activity, you fundamentally alter and change the way people behave, the way the social relationships are organized, and I think that is incredibly important to do that.
And so what do you think this will do for the economy in the short term and the long term?
In the short term, it's impossible to say, and we will not know for at least 2 or 3 years. Colorado went through this a couple of years ago, and they are just now starting to get a handle on the economic benefits, the economic costs. So it's going to be a while until we know. There are going to have to be mechanisms created about how licensing processes and mechanisms about how it is sold, how it's distributed, how revenue is generated, where that revenue goes, because it's still a federal crime. You can't legally sell marijuana. It's still a federal crime. So new banking rules have to be created about how the profits created from the legal sale of marijuana are taxed and are recognized as revenue. So there's much to do in this department, and it will be several years until we really understand in a concrete way what the economic benefits or costs are.
And so in 2010, California had on the ballot to legalize marijuana, and they said no. Yeah. Why do you think people had a change in heart in 2016?
I think these things move rather slowly. I think, if I recall correctly, in 2010 it was close. I don't recall the exact number, but I think it was close. So we came close in 2010, and nowadays 6 years is really not a lot of time, I guess. The way things move so rapidly, the way social opinions about all sorts of things, legalizing marijuana, all sorts of other things that used to be, socially and politically marginalized or questioned. And also, too, I think that several other states, namely Colorado, did it. And Californians have been watching very closely what has happened in Colorado. And it seems to be fairly positive so far.
And so after the elections, now having 8 states legalizing cannabis, do you think this will start a trend and more states will follow suit?
Well, as we were talking off camera, I think if it does start a trend, it will only start a trend in already liberal-oriented states. Many states who are conservative might look at this and say, oh my goodness, we don't want to do that. But it will probably add emphasis to liberal-leaning states who are already thinking about it. But in states in the Midwest and the Southeast where you have very conservative voters and you have very conservative social norms and ideas about drugs, whether it's pot or or even alcohol, things like that. Probably slower to adopt it.
Okay. And what could be the negative effects of having this prop pass?
The negative effects, I would imagine, are the difficulties creating the proper mechanisms to regulate it and identify its improper use. It will be treated like alcohol. You can't smoke pot in public places. You shouldn't smoke pot and drive your car. It's sort of like alcohol. The same legal prohibitions that govern alcohol govern marijuana. So that's the first thing to know. And second, creating mechanisms to determine when those conditions have been violated, what the penalties ought to be. All of that, I think, will be the most challenging part of it and might create the more complicating elements of that.
Well, thank you so
Yep.
much for everything.
Yeah, it's a
that you
pleasure.
said.
Nice to be here.
And now back to you in the studio.